My fiancée texted, "I gave the venue our new guest list. I uninvited 40 of your friends to make room for my yoga class." Without telling me, I replied, "Interesting choice." Then I called the venue, canceled everything, and got him my deposit back. When she arrived for the final menu tasting, original post, I, 34 male, work as a fire suppression technician. That means I install and maintain sprinkler systems in commercial buildings. Before you glaze over, it pays well. Union rate, plus I pick up inspection contracts on the side. All in, I clear about $88,000 a year. I'm not flashy with money. I drive a truck that's old enough to vote. My one financial flex is that I have zero debt and a savings account that would make my father proud. And my father was not a man who was easily impressed. My ex-fiancée teaches yoga. She owns a small studio, rents the space, runs classes, has a steady group of regulars. She makes around $45,000 a year, which she supplements with private sessions and some online content she sells through her website. She's built something real, and I always respected that. She's also the kind of person who uses the word journey without irony, says namaste to the UPS driver, and once described a burrito as having chaotic energy. I found this charming for a surprisingly long time. We were together 3 years, engaged for 7 months. The wedding was set for mid-September, about 9 weeks from the conversation that ended it. The wedding budget was $31,000. I was covering $22,000 of that. Her parents contributed $6,000, and she was covering the remaining $3,000 from her studio income. The venue was booked under my name because I was the one who put down the $7,500 deposit. My credit card, my signature, my name as primary account holder on the contract. This is important. Guest list, we'd agreed on 130 people. Split was roughly 65 each. My side was a mix of family, college friends, union buddies, and a handful of guys I'd known since childhood. Her side was family, college friends, and what she called her studio community, clients and fellow yoga instructors she'd gotten close with over the years. The guest list had been finalized for 2 months. We'd done the seating chart. We'd confirmed the head count with the caterer. It was done. Then, on a random Tuesday, while I was on a job site running pipe through a ceiling grid, I got a text from her. Just a text. Not a call, not a sit-down conversation. A text that said, "Hey babe, so I gave the venue our new guest list this morning. I had to make some adjustments, took off about 40 people from your side to make room for the rest of my yoga community. I know it seems like a lot, but these women have been so supportive of our journey, and it would be wrong not to include them. The venue said the adjusted count is fine. Love you." Folded hand sparkles. 40 people. She removed 40 people from my guest list. Without asking me. Without discussing it. Without even a heads up before she did it. She just called the venue, presented herself as the bride, gave them a new list, and texted me about it afterward like she'd changed a napkin color. I was standing on a ladder 12 feet in the air when I read that text. My apprentice asked me if I was okay, because apparently I made a sound. I don't remember the sound. I remember the feeling, this very specific sensation of the floor dropping out from under a relationship, which is an interesting feeling to have while already in the air. I climbed down, went to my truck, read the text 4 more times. The 40 people she cut included my best friend from childhood, 6 union brothers I've worked with for over a decade, my entire college friend group, my father's best friend who is basically my uncle, and this one especially, my cousin who'd flown in from overseas and already booked his flights. She replaced them with women from her yoga studio. Women I'd met maybe 2 or 3 times. Women whose last names I didn't know. Women who, as far as I could tell, knew her primarily as the instructor who does the 7 a.m. vinyas flow. I sat in my truck for about 10 minutes. Then I texted back, "Interesting choice." That's all I said. 2 words. She responded with a heart emoji and "knew you'd get it 2 hearts." I did get it, just not the way she thought. I spent my lunch break making phone calls. First call, the venue. I identified myself as the primary account holder, which I was, with the contract and deposit in my name. I asked them to confirm whether a guest list change had been submitted that morning. They confirmed it had. I asked if the person who submitted it was authorized on the account. They checked. She was listed as secondary contact for day of coordination purposes, but all contractual changes required primary account holder approval. The coordinator got very quiet when she realized the change had been processed without my sign-off. I asked about their cancellation policy. She said that with 9 weeks' notice, I could cancel with a 60% refund of the deposit. That meant I'd get back $4,500 of my $7,500. I'd lose $3,000. I asked her to process the cancellation immediately, effective that day, and to confirm in writing via email. She asked if I was sure. I said yes. She processed it. I got the confirmation email 14 minutes later. Second call, the caterer. Similar situation, contract was under my name. I canceled and ate a $1,200 penalty on the $4,000 deposit. Got $2,800 back. Third call, the DJ. He was a friend of friend, no formal deposit, just a verbal agreement and a $500 hold fee I'd Venmo'd. He said he'd send a $500 back, and he was sorry to hear things weren't working out. Decent guy. Fourth call, the florist. $1,800 deposit, $600 penalty. Got $1,200 back. By 2 p.m., I had canceled every vendor that was contracted under my name. Total money lost in cancellation penalties, approximately $5,100. Total money recovered, roughly $9,000. Was $5,100 a lot to flush? Yes. Did it feel better than standing at an altar in front of 40 strangers from a yoga studio while my best friend watched from the uninvited list? Also, yes. I didn't tell her. I went back to work, finished the job, went home. She was at the studio teaching an evening class. I ate leftover pasta, watched 2 episodes of a show I don't remember, and went to bed. The final menu tasting was scheduled for Thursday, 2 days away. Update 1, 5 days later. Thursday morning, she left the apartment early to prepare her energy for the tasting. Her words, she said she was going to do a sunrise meditation and then head to the venue. She kissed me on the forehead and said, "Today is going to be so beautiful, babe." I was drinking coffee at the kitchen table, already knowing what was about to happen. I did not go to the tasting. I went to work. At approximately 11:15 a.m., my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. On the 4th call, I picked up. The sound on the other end was a lot. She was half crying, half yelling, and there was an echoey quality like she was in a parking lot. She said, "What did you do?" I said, "I canceled the vendors." "You canceled?" The venue said they have no reservation under our names. The caterer said the contract was terminated. I'm standing in a parking lot, and the coordinator told me there's nothing booked. Correct. Why? Because you removed 40 of my guests without my knowledge or consent and replaced them with your yoga class. I told you about that. I texted you. You texted me after you did it. You didn't ask me before. There's a difference. You can't just cancel a wedding over a guest list. I didn't cancel a wedding over a guest list. I canceled vendor contracts that are in my name because the person I was planning a wedding with made a unilateral decision to cut half my guest list and told me about it via text with a prayer hands emoji. She went quiet for a few seconds. Then she said something that I think was supposed to be a power move, but was actually the most clarifying thing anyone has ever said to me. Those people from your side aren't even important to the wedding. They're just people you know. My yoga community is part of my identity. My best friend since I was 9 years old. Not important. My union brothers who stood next to me when I got my journeyman card. Not important. My cousin who booked an international flight. Not important. But the woman who does Tuesday, 6 p.m. hot yoga? Identity. I said, "I think we're done here." She said, "Don't you dare say that to me right now." I said, "The engagement is over. I'll have your things packed by the weekend. You can coordinate with your sister for pickup." She hung up. I went back to work. My hands were shaking for about an hour, and my apprentice pretended not to notice, which I appreciated. Now here's what happened over the next few days. Her mom called me that evening. Her mom is a real estate agent with the energy of someone who has never been told no by a contractor. She opened with, "You need to understand that my daughter has been planning this wedding for 7 months, and you have destroyed her emotionally." I said, "Your daughter removed 40 of my friends from the guest list without telling me." Her mom said, She was trying to create a meaningful experience surrounded by people who support their union. My best friend supports our union. She cut him. Well, she had to make difficult choices about capacity. She didn't have to make any choices. The guest list was finalized. She unilaterally changed it and told me afterward. Her mom pivoted. Regardless of who's right about the guest list, you've now cost this family thousands of dollars. My husband and I contributed $6,000 to this wedding, and we expect to be reimbursed. I explained, calmly, because I'd already prepared for this, that their $6,000 contribution had been applied to the catering and florist, both of which I'd canceled with penalties. The refunds from those vendors, totaling about $4,000, had come back to MY account because the contracts were under MY name. Their $6,000 was partially absorbed by cancellation penalties and partially returned to me. This is the part where I could have been more generous. I know that. But I also knew that their daughter had blown up a $31,000 wedding because she wanted her yoga students there more than she wanted my friends there, and the family had rallied behind her decision without anyone, not her mom, not her sister, nobody, calling her and saying, hey, maybe you should have discussed this with your fiancé first. So I said, the venue kept $3,000 of the deposit as a cancellation fee. The caterer kept $1,200. The florist kept $600. That's $4,800 in penalties caused by the cancellation, which was caused by your daughter's decision to change the guest list without my consent. I've lost over $5,000 of my own money in this. I'm not in a position to reimburse contributions that were spent on services that your daughter's actions made necessary to cancel. Her mom called me cold and calculating. I said I was a technician, and that calculating was literally my job. She didn't think that was as clever as I did. She hung up. Saturday morning, the day I told her she could pick up her things, her sister showed up with a U-Haul trailer. Not her, her sister. I'd packed everything neatly. Boxes labeled, clothes and garment bags. Even wrapped her crystals in bubble wrap because I'm not an animal. Her sister walked in, looked at the labeled boxes, and said, she wanted me to tell you that you'll regret this for the rest of your life. I said, maybe, but at least my best friend will be at the next wedding. Her sister didn't respond to that. She loaded the boxes. Took about 40 minutes. Left the key on the counter. Done. But it wasn't done, because 3 days later, I got a letter. An actual physical letter, in the mail, hand-addressed, from my ex's yoga studio. It was written on studio letterhead, the kind with a lotus flower watermark and the studio name in a cursive font. The letter was signed by 8 women from her yoga class. This studio community she'd been trying to invite. It was addressed to me, and it said, I'm paraphrasing but barely, that I had caused irreparable harm to a woman who brings light and healing to everyone she touches, and that my inability to see the value of spiritual community was the real reason the relationship failed. It asked me to reflect on the energy I was putting into the world. 8 women I'd never had a real conversation with wrote me a group letter about my energy. On lotus flower letterhead, I put on my fridge. Not out of anger, because it was genuinely the funniest piece of mail I'd ever received, and I wanted to look at it every morning while I drank my coffee. Update 2, 2.5 weeks later. Last update. Things have mostly settled, and I need to close this chapter. The week after the Lotus letter, things escalated one more time before they finally cooled down. My ex decided to fight for the $6,000 her parents had contributed. Not through a lawyer, through her dad. Her dad is a retired shop teacher. Quiet, sensible, builds furniture in his garage. I always got along with him. He called me and in his very calm, measured way said, Son, I know this is a mess. I don't agree with everything my daughter did. But that $6,000 is real money for us, and I'd appreciate it if we could figure out something fair. And you know what? He was right. Her dad didn't invite my friends. Her dad didn't send the yoga letter. Her dad just wrote a check because his daughter was getting married, and now that money was gone. I told him I needed a few days to look at the numbers. I sat down that weekend with every receipt, every refund confirmation, every cancellation penalty. Here's how it broke down. Total deposits I originally paid, $15,300 across all vendors. Total cancellation penalties, $4,800. Total refunds returned to me, $10,500. Her parents' $6,000 have been applied across caterer and florist. The refunds from those two vendors totaled $4,000, which came back to me. Their remaining $2,000 was eaten by the cancellation penalties. I could have argued that the penalties were caused by her daughter, and therefore the loss was on them. Legally, I would have been fine. The contracts were mine. The refunds were mine. End of story. But her dad wasn't her daughter. He called me son on the phone, and he'd meant it. I wrote him a check for $4,000, not the full $6,000. I wasn't eating the penalty for her behavior. But the $4,000 that had actually been refunded from the vendors, their money went to. I drove it to his house on a Sunday morning. He answered the door in a flannel shirt with sawdust on his sleeves. I handed him the check and said, "This is what came back from the caterer and florist. The rest was lost in penalties. I'm sorry." He looked at the check, nodded, and said, "You're a decent man. I wish things had worked out differently." Then he shook my hand and I left. That was the last interaction I had with anyone in her family, and I intend to keep it that way. Total financial damage to me, when all was said and done: $5,100 in cancellation penalties, plus the $4,000 I returned to her father, minus the $10,500 in refunds I received. Net loss: roughly $8,600 out of the original $22,000 I committed. Painful? Extremely. Survivable? Yes. Cheaper than a divorce in 3 years when she uninvites my friends from our life entirely? Absolutely. Now for the aftermath. My ex never contacted me directly after the breakup. Everything came through intermediaries: her mom, her sister, the yoga letter, her dad. I don't know if that was strategic or if she just couldn't face me. I didn't ask. What I did hear, through a mutual friend who remained neutral, was that about 10 days after the cancellation, several women from her yoga studio started asking questions. Apparently, the story she told them was that I had canceled the wedding out of nowhere due to commitment issues. But when the details started leaking, as details always do, the actual guest list situation became known. A couple of her regular clients stopped attending classes. Not a mass exodus, just a quiet thinning. People who realized they'd been unknowingly inserted into someone else's wedding at the cost of the groom's actual friends were apparently uncomfortable with that information. Her Tuesday and Thursday evening classes, which had been her most popular, dropped from about 18 regulars to around 11 within 2 weeks. That's significant when you're running a small studio with tight margins. Each client represents about $120 to $160 per month in recurring revenue. Losing 7 regulars meant she was down roughly $900 to $1,100 per month in income. I didn't cause that. I didn't tell any of those women anything. I didn't contact the studio. The information spread the way information always spreads, through the same community network she'd been trying to install at my wedding. The community she valued more than my friends turned out to be the same community that held her accountable when the full story came out. There's something poetic about that, but I'm a sprinkler guy, not a poet, so I'll just say it's ironic. The 40 friends she'd cut from the guest list, I called every single one of them the week after the cancellation. Not to trash my ex, just to explain that the wedding was off, that I was sorry for any inconvenience, and that I valued them. My cousin, the one who'd already booked international flights, he said, "I'm coming anyway. We'll do something." He flew in 3 weeks later, and we had a cookout at my buddy's place. 16 people showed up. Burgers, cold beer, a folding table in the backyard. My best friend brought his dog. My union brothers showed up straight from a job site in their work boots. It was the best party I've ever been to. Cost about $200 in groceries and beer. No seating chart, no calligraphy, no lotus flower letterhead. Just people who actually wanted to be there. My cousin pulled me aside at one point and said, "You good?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I am," and I mostly meant it. I still have the lotus letter on my fridge. My best friend saw it when he came over for a football game last weekend, and he read it out loud in the most dramatic voice possible, and we laughed until my ribs hurt. He asked if he could frame it. I said no, it's mine. I earned that letter by putting bad energy into the world, and I'm keeping it. I sleep fine. The apartment is quiet. My savings account took a hit, but it's rebuilding. Overtime is plentiful, and I'm picking up extra inspection contracts through the winter. The $8,600 I lost is real money, and I feel it every time I check my balance. But I also feel something else every time I check it: the absence of a problem that would have only gotten bigger. Because here's the thing I keep coming back to. If she could cut 40 people from my life with a text and a prayer hands emoji 9 weeks before the wedding, what would she do after the wedding? When it's not just a guest list, but holidays and weekends, and who we spend time with, and whose friends matter, and whose friends are just people you know. The guest list wasn't the problem. The guest list was the preview. I watched the preview. I decided not to buy the ticket. That's it. I'm done. Thanks for reading. Go call your friends and make sure nobody's cut them from the list.